We always tell candidates when you're preparing for an interview, is actually using the STAR methodology, because I think with technical interviews, they go really in depth, straight to the research and what their findings are. But it's actually that self-awareness, like what did you learn? What would you do differently?
When you do your pitch call, what are you looking for and what is your recruiter looking for in those conversations?
So after the pitch, I'll give them quite concrete examples and say, how would you fare it on this environment? Some people might go, I actually would prefer an environment where it's more structured. Someone that's like, what, that's great. I'm studying a PhD and I've identified X, Y, Z. That sounds right up my alley. So it's definitely someone who's a self-starter and can spot opportunities. That's first. And then the second part, I think it's...
Hello and welcome to another episode of Candidate Journeys with the Open to Work podcast. I am super excited to be joined by Christine Ung. Hello, Christine.
Hi, morning. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm very, very well. I'm super looking forward to this one today. It's got the word quantum in the title. It's got technologies, academia. We're going to get into all sorts of really different types of recruiting here today. So I've been looking forward to this episode. Christine, why don't you start off by introducing yourself and what you do at Quantum Motion?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Matthew. So yes, I've been in the talent space for over 10 years now. Started off my career at a recruitment agency, worked in a marketing analytics startup, a mobile development agency, more recently the Financial Times. And then after I got my indefinite leave to remain, which means I'm now British, and then it opened up more doors to companies who couldn't sponsor visas. But then the Quantum Motion came up, and we are a quantum computing scale up. And of course, I think there's a lot of hype around the word quantum out there. But long story short, what we build are supercomputers, and there are a lot of different what we call technology nodes, i.e. there are lots of different ways quantum computing can be implemented. And this is where it starts getting very theoretical, because it's essentially based off the principles of quantum mechanics. And really, people who are able to work in this type of sector are people with a background in physics, mostly PhDs. But our implementation of it more specifically is one particular area, what we call spin qubits. And we are leveraging existing materials, silicon, in order to help us build this technology. So another, kind of longer story short, is we're using the existing knowledge and infrastructure of silicon technology and building quantum properties onto a semiconductor chip. So the very same chips you have on your phone and on your laptops, this is what we're trying to build here at Quantum Motion. So it's really exciting journey because it's never been done before. Of course, you've got the semiconductor industry on its own, which has been around for decades. But the quantum industry is very, very new. The talent that's coming out of it are from very kind of small and specific niche research groups. But it's starting to grow. So I've been here for 3 years. I initially started off in pure TA. So we were 12 people when I joined. We're now 60 plus 12 PhDs and another 5 contractors. So about 100 people all in all together. So my remit has changed to a more people role as well over the last year. So it's been an interesting transition.
So, Christine, that was super interesting way of explaining quantum mechanics, quantum motion and stuff. So, but let's kind of take a look at this at another angle. My mum is probably one of our top listeners. She listens to every single episode. She's a huge fan. And she is happy to provide me feedback on the podcast as well, which I always love.
Sure.
Hi, Mum. But what does she need to know about quantum mechanics and building a supercomputer, and why is this going to impact her?
Why should she care? And what's really interesting? These are questions I normally ask my candidates as well, because they are PhDs and they get really theoretical. And I go, explain your research to me like I'm a 5-year-old. So hopefully,
now you can say, explain your research to me like you're on a podcast talking about Matt's mum.
Fine. Yes, that makes sense. So our current state of computers, right? Let's say, what are the use cases of quantum computing? Cryptography is a great example. So the MOD has acquired a quantum computer last year. And let's say you were about to not break into a phone, but MOD, let's say you need to break into a phone for whatever reason. At the moment, because there's so many kind of different with the algorithms, there's so many kind of different ways, and it probably takes about 8 months to break into a phone at the moment. So if you think about having like multiple I guess, what we call high computing power, it is able to break into a phone within 30 seconds. So
Right.
that's just one particular use case. But let's say if you look into wider I suppose, use cases out there: materials modeling, medicine, artificial intelligence. At the moment, we're using so much data. It requires huge kind of data centers, lots of energy usage, very expensive, and it's only in the hands of a very kind of select few people that's able to afford this type of technology at the moment, right? So, in the end goal is, if everyone is able to have a 3 by 3 millimeter chip, which has the exact same compute power as a huge kind of data center, the implications of it is vast, right? And I think the core things right now, actually, what we see, the early use cases are banks. Of course, if you're looking at banks which are using, you know, I would say algorithm and trading, requires lots of data and lots of energy usage. That's just kind of one particular sector that can afford it right now. But in the future, we're able to democratize this access to the masses. Yeah, there's going to be lots of applications for this
So,
on the day to
so
day.
to kind of summarize, then you're trying to kind of build the consumer version of a supercomputer that you could have equivalent on your phone.
I would say so, yes. So we're still in research and development at the moment. We're still figuring that piece out. But I would say at the moment, we're kind of building it more for other companies. So because it is still such an early stage of the quantum computing journey, if you will, everyone's building something different within the space. So someone might be building AWS, Amazon Web Services, for quantum computing. We are building the hardware, so we're building the chips. So not every quantum computing company are focused on the hardware side as
Yeah.
well. So we're solving the hard problems now.
Yeah. And also, just to be clear, like, this is, whilst there's an element of ongoing theoretical research or something, like, this is actually, like, these do exist and people are using these right now.
Yes, for sure. But I guess one thing to add to that is, whereas people using it right now, it is not as sophisticated as a classic computer that we're using right now. So there's a lot of simulations happening, like the what ifs, like this is what if this is going to happen, how would that work? And as an industry overall, they're looking at something what they called error correction rate. So that's a really kind of big metric that the industry looks at to say, right, is this actually working the way it's supposed to? But overall, the industry, I would say about maybe 3 to 5 years away still from it working in terms of how it's supposed to. So yeah, there's a big hype cycle around it. If you read a lot of news about, quantum has achieved quantum supremacy, as an industry, we always look at, well, what are the papers behind it? Who's the team behind it? What is the sample size? So you learn a lot about, separating the hype and the PR from the actual science behind it as well.
When I kind of think, when I'm listening to you, what kind of comes to my head is the image of, like, the original IBM computers, and and that kind of in my head is like what the current, like, version of our kind of data centers and how we process information, and then we're trying to get to, and you're on that journey to get to a MacBook.
Yeah.
That's the kind of long tail journey that we're going on. But it feels like you're saying that's kind of not 30, 40 years away. That's kind of 10 years away.
Yeah, optimistically. And I think there's a lot more companies now maturing. So 3 years ago, everyone's just starting out, still in R&D. There's, reasonable amount of investment going into this industry as well, both here and on the other side of the pond in the US. And yeah, I think it's starting to gain traction. It depends, I think, as I mentioned earlier, which technology node, and also the applications of it. So whether it's on the hardware side, because on the software side, it's definitely a lot more mature than the hardware side, I'd say. But interesting, you pick up IBM as well. Like, one of our team leads, I was actually working at IBM Research back in the day, and he said the vibes at Quantum Motion now is very similar to early days IBM Research. We're like, great, that's good to hear.
Yeah, very cool. I mean, this feels like, if we think about, like, if we're like in the stages of different sorts of technology revolutions and mankind revolutions, and and we're currently in what lots of people say is the AI revolution. If quantum computing is able to happen in the sort of the ways and can be able to compute the sorts of data that you're saying it can, that will almost be its own micro revolution or significant revolution, because the way that technology will be able to progress and the way it'll be able to manage and store and interact with the data at the scale that it needs to will just absolutely fundamentally change technology all over again.
Yeah.
And that's
I think
another parrot, right?
Exactly. And I think another point to note is, everyone goes, quantum AI is always grouped in the same bucket, right? We are not the same, to mention that. So I think, AI is definitely kind of leveraging more of the software and the algorithms aspect. What quantum is able to provide is actually give AI enough kind of data and support in the back end. And at the moment, as we could see, as I mentioned earlier, it leverages a lot of data and energy usage. So with quantum, everything is just able to move like 10x or 100x faster in the future.
Yeah. I was at a conference recently, and they said that for every 100 words that you kind of get a response with ChatGPT, it costs 4 liters of water. And so if we can, and that's just from data processing. And so if we can consolidate that down into these kind of much more high performing, high functioning chips, obviously that has a considerable environmental impact that will benefit all of us, whilst being able to get a kind of technology that will also hopefully help lots of people as well.
Yeah, it really makes you question when you're having those conversations with GPT, and what when you're asking really kind of silly questions like, how much energy are you using here and then consuming just for that one little bit.
Yeah, it should almost like have a prompt, and then people wouldn't use it. But anyway, we digress. So sounds like you're taking on like really like a fundamental like human challenge and technology challenge that will kind of demonstrably change the kind of the industry. That must create quite a good vibe in Quantum Motion at the moment. Like, how does the company feel? Like, why are people excited? Imagine that you're on the kind of precipice of things.
Yeah, good question. I think early days of the company when it was 12. So our founders are both professors at Oxford and at University College London. So a lot of the early employees are from the research groups, which helped. And I think once I joined, it was really figuring out, I've never hired in this space before. What do we do? And that took me a while to get there. I would say candidates, or rather students who are ready in quantum, understand the impact of what they do. The struggle really started, I would say, when we started to bolster our what we call integrated circuits, so our electronics engineering team. Bearing in mind they've worked in very traditional companies that's been around for a while, and how the electronics industry works is, they operate in like one very kind of small element in a wider team. So the same as in software, we're front end and back end. The same thing in electronics. They have layout and design front end and back end. So they'll just do one really minor bit in a very small chip, and that's all they do. So how could you convince them to come work in a startup that's unproven? Not only that, but we're also doing something that's never been done before, and you might be doing everything from front end and back end. And it's actually trying to explain what quantum is and exactly what I just shared to that talent, and whereas they get it, they're used to being in a more comfortable, larger environment. And another thing that was interesting here as well is usually in those environments, they have an end client, i.e. Intel or Apple, where the chip then goes to an end client, whereas for us, the end client is still us. So it's trying to sell more, I suppose, the opportunity of working in a startup versus the end goal in quantum itself. And 3 years on, actually, we started looking at our onboarding data, as I mentioned, and I got the people role as well. A lot of our non-quantum teams go, I actually don't know what we do, and I do as well sometimes, but what is quantum? Where do we sit in the wider ecosystem? What does our team actually do that contributes to, the wider vision of the company? So we're actually starting to run next week introduction to quantum computing workshops.
Wow.
Or non-technical staff, so we're excited to launch that.
So if I had you back on in a month or two's time, you'd be you'd be able to give me explain it to my mum even better.
Yeah, I hope so. I use that as a metric. But it's interesting though, because when you're small, you're just going and going and going, and then you kind of take a step back and go like, right, what are we not really doing properly here? We realize it's actually back to basics.
Because it will be hard for like a business to like measure and evaluate its success if like a significant portion of the business doesn't actually understand what it's doing.
Yeah. And we actually write that in our specs for the integrated circuit teams as well. No prior quantum knowledge required. What we want is your, electronic engineering skills. So, and that's all fine and good. They come in and bring that in. But after a while, if they still don't quite understand how it all kind of connects, then, that is a problem. So that wasn't,
And I imagine that we can talk, we'll get into kind of the who and the how, but like, it feels like from the outside, when you find people who really get what you're doing, it self-selects, right? Like someone from like these more traditional environments, right? Who they're not going to come and work at your business almost regardless of if they don't like fully understand or get excited by your vision. Is there an element of someone self-selecting that they want to work in this, they want to work on that cutting edge, and therefore they're much more likely to want to join you? It's about finding those really kind of niche groups of people.
Yeah, and I to kind of highlight the different areas. So we have the quantum theorists. So that's a purely kind of blue sky theoretical engineers. They're mainly, again, PhDs in theoretical physics with quantum hardware. And for them, they need to be hands-on. We call them experimental. So they're the ones you see the lab coat in the labs. And again, physicists, PhDs. We have software computational teams. So what we call them intelligent automation, really machine learning. And then, of course, we have the integrated circuits like electronics engineers. And more recently, we got product and project management and whatnot, who all have engineering degrees, by the way. But I think what's interesting is with the software side, because we advertise as research software engineer or quantum software engineer, we get a lot of pure play software engineers who apply and they go, "Ooh, quantum sounds cool." So, case example, our recent internship applications, we had over 300 plus to go through.
Wow.
Yeah, which is great, I think, and it's unheard of, I think, especially in a in a software role. And I've always worked in tech recruitment. But I think it's also separating the hype from actually candidates who know what quantum is about,
Mm.
right? Because there's one thing about, ooh, one click apply, that sounds awesome. But then really going deeper and saying, right, what have you actually done that you can translate into what we do? Because what we do isn't fancy AI work yet, right? We are building a lot of the data pipelines. They're going to be working with teams who are hacking a lot of software. Research software is very traditional. So they actually sit down with the team and go, right, what are you doing here in the labs? What can we help you automate? And actually, it's very kind of, I believe they use a MATLAB at the moment. So it's actually sitting down with them and then understanding what they do. So it's not the funky stuff that you're reading about. So it's
Yeah.
actually hiring talent who understands that's the real problems that we're trying to solve. And, maybe what they want is, again, the 5-10 years from now us, not current us.
So Otis and James are one of the leading people and talent agencies. Since 2013, they've been responsible for over 1,000 people and talent hires, including one in a company that I used to work at. They helped me hire my head of technology TA. So I know the guys there pretty well. They've been responsible for scaling some of the most innovative companies in the UK and the EU. Also recently just launched in the US. So even folks in your neck of the woods now, James, can get involved for contingent, retained, and executive search. And they also now do embedded through AJX. So they can do it all. Yeah, and just to kind of dig into kind of pipelining of talent, right? Because obviously the sorts of people you're looking to hire are extraordinarily niche. I imagine that aside from maybe the intern group and a couple of other types of roles, like these people aren't rushing to you. And maybe I'm wrong. I'd love to hear, but so how are you are you proactively identifying a lot of talent and where are you going to find people? I'd love to hear a little bit more about this. I'm sure lots of people out there would be interested to hear, where do you go to find these sorts of people?
Yeah, and it varies. So the theory team, because of our founders, being professors, they actually have an inbound pipeline because these are their students, right? And that helps because they would already have identified, right, these are our top 3 in this current cohort. They're going to come intern with us, and we'll convert them into permanent down the line. The experimentalists, the physicists, that's a trickier one because, as I mentioned earlier, they all need PhDs, which understandably, in a startup, when you're 12 people, you need people who can come in, get the ball rolling, and actually mentor others. And we were just not really in a state to be training more junior staff. But that said, fast forward 3 years later, we've recently dropped the PhD requirement. Very happy about that. Actually, not very many quantum companies do that, and I think they'll start to. And we called it the rotation program. So we are now opening our doors to master students from any STEM background, and the successful candidates will rotate around 3 different teams, with the end goal after year 1, they can stay in their home team and become a fully fledged quantum engineer. And then on the software side, interestingly enough, we've had to split them into 2. So there's one part, as I mentioned earlier, that is the team that is working closely with the hardware team. So they need to have a physics background to understand, what they do on a day-to-day. But we also have now our pure play software team, where we're hiring engineers who come from a more traditional software background, who understand what we call software development lifecycle, looking at documentation and actually bringing a bit of structure in terms of how we do things here. And then last but not least, more recently, we also have a product team as well. So as we're on our road to productization, we have a team that's looking into, what are potential use cases, what are our clients, potential clients going to be looking at, and we're actually hiring a project manager as well at the moment. So that's our first kind of non-technical hire. So yes, each one has their own, I suppose, dynamic from what I see. And, the theoretical one, we don't really have an issue with, but I would find the experimentalists and the software ones we do struggle with. So we do some outward sourcing. So admittedly, because it was just me for the first 3 years, we do use a recruitment agency on the integrated circuit side. So someone who understands the IC, has worked in the IC space rather for the last, 30, 40 years. But more recently actually brought in a recruiter. She's great. And she actually used to head up the quantum desk at an agency. And it's really amazing to find someone really passionate about the space that just also gets it. So she's been actively actually delving deep into the research groups and headhunting people from
I imagine these people aren't sitting on kind of LinkedIn in the way that other sorts of roles would be. And
Exactly. So on that, we'll be looking like Google Scholar. So we'll be looking at, over the past year. So not just actually what I've learned as well in this process is, it's not just seeing, candidates have so-and-so candidate have released X papers on, let's say, quantum transpilers or something. But like, well, what year did it come out? 5 years ago? Nope, it's not recent enough. So you'd be looking at, so you need to be looking at the frequency. Have they actually published something of value? So if they've actually just replicated someone else and just did something marginally better, that's not good enough. They need to be, researching and finding something like relatively new. And also be active in conferences. So our team goes to very specific, what they call American Physics Society March meeting every year in March, something called Silicon Quantum Information Workshop every November. So we are very present at these events, and rather than, we do sponsor, but we need to make sure our team delivers something and presents something of value there as well. Because with this type of talent, really what they're looking at is, what are the papers? What have they done recently? They don't even look at marketing and hype. When you talk about, we're Series B funded, I don't think they really care.
Are you doing something interesting? Are you going to move the needle? It's such I think if any other recruiters are listening to this, or any people out there listening to this is a conceptually really different type of recruiting to most of the recruiting that happens, and the way that you have to work and think about the types of roles that you're hiring. Like, this is very different to like 99% of recruiting out there. And like maybe the closest alignment is if you're hiring like very specific like software engineers, or you need to hire at scales, you might be on like something like GitHub, but this is really like a very interesting and very different type of recruiting. But I could talk about this for hours because I'm a bit of a nerd and I like talking about this stuff, but I think we should talk about how you hire, right? So we've understood that there's multiple different channels of kind of getting into the business. Yes, you still have kind of applications, but you also have a network of researchers that you're going through. You're going out on conferences, you're going out and speaking to people and being proactive on the market. But now let's say that someone has got into the process, right? They've started a recruitment process. Maybe let's walk through like what a general overview might look like, or if we start like, here's one stream, depending on how do you think it would be best to do this? Like, let's focus on the academic stream first, or...
Yeah, to be honest, I mean, it's all, if we kind of step back and just look at the funnel, it is all very similar. It's going to be always 3 stages. The HR, I'm always first, or recruiter. So, the first part is always still us pitching the company. As you know, it's still a two-way street, and it's very competitive in this space. So not just why quantum computing, but why silicon, why this particular technology node that we're using. And what we're
like a subgenre, like, so there would be like differences on whether or not the way that you're thinking about solving this problem is the right way, and people might have philosophical differences about how you're solving it. That's very interesting.
Yeah, because I will get candidates, for example, that's been working in like topological qubits, and they might go, well, I haven't really ventured into this area, so I might venture in. Or someone that's been purely working in silicon go, I've been doing this for the last 6 years, I want to try something new. And you can't stop them, right? If that's their research interest. But anyway, so it's definitely always HR initially, and of course delving deeper, next part would be the technical, and then the final round is still very much values driven, and our founders meet every single candidate still in the final round. So that's always going to be the structure. And of course where it deviates would be in the technical deep dive element. So depending on the teams, it is mostly on the theoretical or on the physics side. Actually, it's all very similar. They all have to come in and do a presentation on their most recent research work. Because at this level in PhDs, they always have to present. They need to convince people that their ideas will stick. And that's where the team, I suppose, grills them on the research. So that's the first part, is understanding what they've done. And then
And
the
this is something
second
that's already that they're working on, so they'll
they're
have
working on.
something that's relatively well
Exactly.
prepared anyway. So it's not
Exactly.
like you're asking them to do
No.
like a 3-hour, 90-day plan. It's like
Exactly.
present your most recent piece of research.
Exactly. And if they've done a master's or done a PhD, they should be
They'll
really
have to
doing
do a
this last year.
Viva.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly. They really should be looking into this last year or 3 years or 4 years. So, that's already in their head. It's more the questions, I suppose, we'll be
Yeah.
asking them that they won't prepare for. And then the second part, we would give them a paper that we've worked on. And this is an interesting one because I've asked the team, I've just kind of done it. I've asked the team, like, why do we do this? It's actually seeing how well they absorb new information. And we would ask them to summarize the paper and tell us what part of this particular paper are they most interested in and how do you think they can contribute with their skill set based on this paper. So that kind of typically rolls into that one technical interview. And then the final interview is usually with our CTO or our CEO. He's also himself technical. And I've seen them in action actually with the CTO. It's typically a whiteboarding interview. He might ask them, quite a basic physics question. And again, if you're doing a PhD, you might not be thinking about the basics because this was 5-6 years ago now at this point. And you can just see them kind of being a bit stunned, like, but he would guide them usually, and then they would end up coming into a solution at the very end. And the candidates usually come out, I'm like, how did it go? They're like, I've not thought about this in a really long time. But you can tell the difference when you kind of goes, wow, that was great. Versus one says, oh my God, I don't remember anything from 6 years ago. And, they start getting really nervous. But yeah, usually at that point, it's just more memory recall and, making sure they know the foundations and the basics. So that's the 3 levels of interviews typically.
We are delighted to be sponsored by MetaView. MetaView is the AI assistant for the interview process. Their AI records and transcribes hiring conversations like interviews, intakes, and debriefs, and then provides a perfectly summarized note of everything that was discussed. That means that you can focus on creating human connections with candidates during calls and save time on the busy work of cleaning up notes after every interview. I've spoken to so many recruiters and recruiting leaders who are loving using MetaView across their organizations. It's saving them time, but it also means that they have more data to make better decisions. So for every candidate and every pipeline, hiring teams can now make confident and informed decisions, and recruiters can finally take control of the interview process. The impact on candidate experience is also massive. Since recruiters don't have to worry about taking notes in the moment, they can really focus on being present and engaged with you. Forward-thinking recruiters at high-performing organizations like Brex, HelloFresh, and Quora are all leveling up their interviews with MetaView. So head on over to metaview.ai/open to work to get started for free on your first 5 calls. So let's go back. When you do your pitch call, I imagine there's also an element of you wanting to evaluate them and their capabilities to an extent as well.
Yes, yeah.
What are you looking for, and what is your recruiter looking for in those conversations?
Yeah. So after the pitch, usually I think because we're not technical and we always say like, look, I'm not an engineer in the room. We would typically ask them how they would fare out in a startup / scale up environment. I usually give them an example. We have grown from 20 now to 60. We're from 1 unit to 3 different units. It's a type of environment where you need to spot opportunities. And I give them some examples of our team who have come in and spotted opportunities, are now running their own projects, who've gone from a mid-level engineer now to staff and managing people within 3 years. So I'll give them quite concrete examples and say, how would you fare out on this environment? And the reality, again, like you said, is self-select. Some people might go, I actually would prefer an environment where it's more structured. I need proper management. I need a clear progression framework, which we're working on now. But, when we were 12, we didn't have that. Versus someone that's like, that's great. I'm studying a PhD and I've identified X, Y, Z. That sounds right up my alley. So it's definitely someone who's a self-starter and can spot opportunities. That's first. And then the second part, I think it's mentorship and collaboration. Because our teams are so interdisciplinary, a lot of researchers sometimes are quite used to working in silos and independently. We need to ask, well, what we're working on, it's never been done before. So how would you collaborate with the electronics engineering team on that side? Give me examples on how you collaborate. Surprisingly, you find a lot of researchers don't really have concrete examples in that aspect. So I think those are the core competencies that I'll look out for in the beginning.
You could have used a kind of behavioral interview questions, like tell me about a time when, but then also kind of just like presenting structures to them and asking them to kind of reflect on what they think about those kind of ways of working,
Yeah.
especially cultural. I think not enough businesses do this, and they kind of try and deeply assess someone, but just sort of laying out like, look, this is what it's like here. How does that ring with you? What are kind of some of the concerns or questions that you would have? Why do you think that would be the right working style for you if it is? And letting the kind of candidate go on their own journey.
Yeah, and being human about it as well, right? Yes, it's very technical, it's very theoretical, but the reality is we're all also working in the unknown right now. And, you could be working on one thing today and tomorrow you could pull the plug and it'll completely change direction. Of course, more on the day to day, not the visions or our technical roadmap. But, how would you deal with this when, excuse my language, the shit hits the fan, because it will, right?
Yeah. And so they've kind of answered that effectively through you. When you're going to get to the technical presentation, that first one, there's two there. What do you recommend to candidates on how they should best prepare and think about these challenges?
Yeah, so we also have an interview rubric. So we align our hiring managers before they go into interview, especially the more junior roles, the rotation program, and it's actually very simple, right? And I think we always tell candidates when you're preparing for an interview, most candidates would know this already, but I think a lot of students don't. It's actually using the STAR methodology, because I think with technical interviews, they go really in depth, like I did at the beginning of this call. They go straight to their research and, what their findings are. But it's actually being, like I mentioned earlier, having that self-awareness, like what did you learn? What would you do differently? Answering the questions in terms of like, what's the structure? What did you find? What are the actions? What we do differently? And then that's just very simple, summarizing it in a really succinct way, rather than going really in depth. So I would say, if you've got a theoretical knowledge and you have all the baseline knowledge, it's there, but it's just having to sell yourself in the right way.
If I've learned anything from working with academics and then anything from working with technical talent, is they're really, really good at like talking about their research, but sometimes fall short about talking about the impact and the outcome, because they're so interested in like the theory, but they kind of like the outcome is almost incidental, but they love talking about the theory so much and like the technical challenge that was behind it. And I think especially for engineering talent, from my experience, like really, using that STAR structure is as relevant, if not more relevant, for you to say, like, what was the impact on the business? Why should I care about this very, very interesting, complex thing that you've done?
Yeah, for sure. And have you come across top grading?
Yeah.
We don't, the team doesn't know they use it yet, but I've always kind of implemented it in roles that we've worked on. I think we will at some point, but there's an element of that as well. Like,
explain to the audience what top grading is and why they.
Yeah, so top grading, I would say, I think it was championed by McKinsey from the early 1990s. It is a type of interviewing technique. It's a methodology where teams would identify what the core competencies are that they want to interview within the team. And sometimes it could go really way back. I know Goldman Sachs uses this for their senior leadership team when they're trying to hire managing directors, but they might go way back in terms of like the GCSEs and A levels. Like, why did you pick biology? Why did you pick chemistry for A levels? And they want to see that you've actually made mistakes and you've learned from it and then you've grown as an individual. So your story, your background has to tell a story. But in sense of the kind of day-to-day, if it's implemented on a lighter level, I think the interesting part for us is always the self-awareness piece with top grading. So you don't just answer a question and say, like, tell me about a time where you've, deployed something and, it went wrong. And you just give, the STAR methodology, which is great, but it's a self-awareness piece after. Like,
what's your reflection?
My reflection on this, how would I do it differently next? I wouldn't use an outsourced team, for example. So that's, I think, an element of top grading. It's understanding what you do differently and how did you grow as an individual then.
Yeah, there's when we say the STAR methodology, so it's situation, task, action, result. There's often people add on the additional R, which is reflection. If you had this opportunity again, what would you do differently? How would you approach this project next time? Like those sorts of, what did you learn? What mistakes did you make? Like those are really good kind of questions to prepare. And so as you're thinking about maybe preparing for either an interview with Quantum Motion or others, really digging into the results. It's like the classic error is that candidates just don't talk about the results well enough. And then what would you do differently?
Yeah, exactly. And I think linking on back to the top grading thing again. I mean, this idea I do get on board with, but the whole premise of using top grading as hiring what they say A players. And if you when I was just pure play hiring, you're like, okay, that makes sense. But then now that I'm more of a people role with the people hat on, when you're doing your, let's say your 9 post grid, your kind of management evaluation, and you're going, well, if 90% of your team are all A players, I would say that's a bit of a risk, right? Because, you can't have someone that's always going to be like, I need the newest projects, I need all the latest innovations. You need people who's a safe pair of hands on this kind of bracket, and you need people who are dependent, who are quite happy just doing their role and then just going home at 5, and that's a reality of the team
Yeah.
structure. So yeah, that's what I've kind of learned over time. I think back then when I was in the startup where we implemented this, we're like, yeah, everyone's an A player. But as time went on, it's actually understanding the team overall. So I don't necessarily call them A players. It's actually kind of finding a name that suits your team, and I suppose what you're trying to build over there. But that was how up top grading came from.
Well,
It's
and I
hiring
think
A players.
it's either in Good to Great, or I think it's in Good to Great
Yeah,
where they talk about this idea of like
Jim
rock
Collins.
stars, and the idea that it's like the rocks of your team and like the ones that are coming in and are doing that work every single day and don't necessarily like want to rush up the corporate ladder, and
Yeah,
but then and then you have that kind of 10% that is maybe doing that, but your actual business is successful based on those rocks that are in your team that are delivering every single day quietly and effectively. And I think that is, there's this like really big discussion happening around talent density, which essentially is just a new term for hiring A players, right? But I think there is an element of how do you incorporate that like just raw delivery into, when you're hiring smart and ambitious people who want to be the best at what they do, you also need to be able to, they're going to want to go on to the next thing very quickly. And you need people who're just going to get their head down and deliver sometimes. And I think it's a really interesting kind of challenge, especially for a business that's kind of going through a maturity scale now as they go from 100 to 500. Okay, so then for the founder interview, what are kind of some of is it preparing around the same thoughts? Like what would you recommend to candidates to maximize their success?
Yeah, and now I would say our values, which is interesting because as a company, they're quite against the fact that we have values. And I'm like, but you have it. I see you do it on a day to day. But it is mainly around taking initiative. Do they have independence? Or can they work independently, but at the same time, mentorship and collaboration, and creativity? Because what we do is so new and novel. So typically around the founder interview, it's around that. And again, because both of them are technical, my CEO, my CTO, they will ask some quite technical questions around, maybe tell me about a time when you come up with something novel in your research. So it's normally tied back into that individual's topic of interest, but it's always going to be around these four
Yeah.
values. And I think these are something we do mention upfront in the initial interview with myself. I would think in the technical deep dive, it's all about their own research, right? So it would typically be asking questions always around the 4 values.
And what are those 4 values?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I think we don't have any because the team's quite against it. But I would say it's just more around, like competency that they can display. So the initiative, independence, mentorship, and creativity, I would say are the 4 kind of more competencies.
Got it. Okay. So what is a common mistake that you see by a candidate?
Yeah. I think not understanding the role. Because the examples I gave earlier, for example, like the quantum software engineer roles. Wow, quantum software engineer. It sounds cool. I'm a software engineer. Let's apply for it. And they're not really relevant or not even the same tech stack at all, period. But I can give an example of, let's say, hiring for apprentices. So one thing I didn't mention earlier is to open up our talent pool and open up our doors. We have a workshop team, and what they do is they're in the labs, they're soldering. There could be some challenges that the teams are facing with maybe one particular aspect of the dilution fridge. So what this team does is then go on and try to problem solve, and they could be 3D printing something like a little axis that'll work in the lab. So these are all things that we don't study for this type of thing, right? Are they electronic engineers? Are they not? So we started hiring apprentices. And they will get a 4-year electronics engineer degree whilst working with us on site. And it's interesting because with the applications, and this all comes from the gov.uk website, you see a lot of applications using GPT. And I can see it now because they all say exactly the same thing. So bearing in mind, these could be 17, 18-year-olds who's never kind of come across quantum computing or understand quantum mechanics. They'll say, oh, wow, why do you want to work in quantum computing? It's fascinating because it's a frontier of science and technology. I want to leverage the principles of quantum computing, quantum mechanics, like
It's like no
superposition,
17
entanglement.
or 18-year-old talks like
Yeah, you're like, what?
that.
I don't even know this. Why would you know that? And so that's definitely using GPT, first mistake. And secondly, why would you want to work in the workshop? If they kind of read the job description further, they will see it's actually a pure play workshop role. And the type of candidates that is ideal for us is what we see, like a kid that's a mechanic that's been, servicing his dad's motorbikes. Um, Sophia, who we hired last year, she loves crocheting, very hands-on. It's actually just very simple things like that. On the software side, tinkering with an Arduino, hooking up a Raspberry Pi, and building a vacuum cleaner, right? It's just something very simple like that. So those are kind of great examples of a great engineer. But on the other side, it's not understanding the role itself. So I think just looking into the job spec and just sharing your authentic self. You don't need to use GPT to tell us why you want to work in quantum mechanics. We already know, but I think it's just showcasing your what you like doing. And kind of going on further to that, we had several on-site interviews. We tell them to bring their passion projects on site, and someone bought on a 3D model, printed model of Yoda, which for me, I was like, wow, that's really cool. And then one of our team goes, well, how did you print this 3D model? And they just kind of said, well, I just found some template online and printed it. Well, you haven't really designed it from scratch, have you? So that was also something I learned from the process, sitting in with the interviews with a team. It's like, we want people who can design and 0 to 1, not just find a template online and print it. There's no difference than just, printing something, right, from just putting something online. So that's not really showcasing how you think or how you problem solve. You're just showcasing, how to Google.
Yeah, and firstly, I absolutely love that you do apprenticeships. I think so many businesses can really benefit from this. It's like a fun, I like, the university system as a business that benefits from the university system greatly, ensuring that there are other more accessible means getting into the workforce, especially technical workforces, is something that most companies just won't attempt to do because they'll assume it's too hard and it takes too much effort. But I'm sure that you will have a long tail massive benefit from being able to curate your own talent literally from scratch, and you'll give an opportunity to so many people who wouldn't have had access to that. And I think there's a lot to be praised and congratulated for that, because I just don't see other technical businesses doing that really.
Yeah, thanks. We love it as well, and it's great to see Sophia, who joined us last year, grow. She's very much integrated part of the team. We just hired a second apprentice she's gonna mentor, so it's going to be interesting to see this journey.
I can't wait to hear about this, like in 4 years' time, and like bring the apprentices on and like have a chat with them. Like I'd love to hear about their journey, and it should be a champion for many other businesses to do the same.
It's interesting because, like, obviously the degree has to align to the Institute of Engineering guidelines. So every time we're on a call, like every quarter, we're like, well, she's done X, Y, Z. And they go, it's not really in our curriculum. So it's really hard when you're building something so novel that it has to also then align back to the IET curriculum. But yeah, we're learning as well.
Yeah, amazing. And then so what are your top 3 recommendations for candidates who want to work at Quantum Motion?
Yeah, firstly, I would say take the initiative to understand what we do. I think looking beyond the quantum hype, why are we using silicon? Why are we using this particular semiconductor approach? Of course, if you're applying for like the theory and the hardware teams, having the theoretical understanding and know-how is crucial. But I'm assuming if you're also applying for the more graduate level roles, I think demonstrating your independence. So even going out there and not saying write a paper about it already, but understanding why Quantum Motion is also passionate about our particular approach and demonstrating how you could be a fit in this environment. And then last but not least, I would definitely say it is the mentorship, the collaboration approach from a grad level as well. Because we get a lot of candidates that say from electronics engineering background, and that's great. They're able to demonstrate how they can contribute from the IC team, but why the quantum computing side? And what we've seen, I can give an example, is candidates who proactively then said, oh, there's a master's degree at UCL that does quantum information. I'm going to go do that for a year. And then show that this is how I'm interested in quantum computing. I think it's a challenge because it's not like software roles where you can go on and do a Coursera course for 3 months and then lo and behold, be an expert in it. Unfortunately, it is one of those areas that you do need to do a little bit of deeper research into. Maybe do a 6-month program online on why, at least understand the fundamentals and the basics of quantum computing. But that said, we also have the apprenticeship courses as well, apprenticeship opportunities. So if that's one of interest to you, I would say understand why you like building things and start building things in your own time that you can share with us.
Yeah, once an engineer, always an engineer, right? It's, if you're a builder, no matter kind of how you attempt to build. And it's so interesting because you have this like very accessible entry level part of your business, which lots of businesses don't have, and then you have this like very inaccessible where you like have to be like a deeply knowledgeable about like the concept of what these things are and like be interested in it. And it's so interesting that you have those two kind of streams running alongside each other, because they present totally different ways of engaging and attracting talent and how you think about recruiting. So it sounds like you've thought about it really, really well, and well done to you.
Thank you. Lots of context switching, I would say.
Yeah, I bet. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Christine, for coming on. I hope this is kind of valuable for all of those folks who are kind of considering any layer that working at Quantum Motion. Any kind of last words that you would say to kind of a candidates? Maybe round us out with like, why do you love what you've been there a little while now? Why do you love working there?
Yeah, I mean, look, I've been there for 3 years and it feels like day one every single day. I'm always on my toes, and being the first non-technical hire as well. When I was in a lot of our meetings, I felt like I was in a front row seat of a physics lecture, but these are world-class leaders in their field. And I think every day I'm kind of pinching myself, like I am actually working with this hiring manager who's been cited X amount of times and he is a world leader in X, right? So it's just fascinating to be in the cutting edge of technology and to be working around such amazing people. And because they haven't hired before, I get to help them on this journey. And I think that the most exciting thing as well is seeing people come in, doing their own research, going to do public speaking on their own, and just seeing this journey grow. So I'm very excited for the next phase, where we start productizing, where we start to see the impact of our work. And I think that's where the fun will really start beginning. So definitely, if you haven't considered a career in quantum, now is the time.
And where can we find any opportunities at Quantum?
Any opportunities in quantum or quantum motion?
At Quantum Motion, sorry.
Okay, quantummotion.tech. Our careers page would have all of our opportunities at the moment.
Fantastic. Well, Christine, thank you so much. We got into so many different topics there, and I feel like I've also learned something about quantum and recruiting as well, and the complexity of it, and I really enjoyed listening.
Hopefully your mum did as well. So
shout out to Mother Parker. And for those of you listening, we're doing these candidate journeys episodes every week. This is in addition to our Wednesday episodes where we kind of supporting candidates in navigating this kind of really challenging job market all around the world. And if you're interested in asking us any questions or kind of recommending a guest that you want to come on, reach out on opentoworkpod@gmail.com. And then also we have our community, which is now 40 members plus. We've got an amazing resume week that we've just done, where we had a cohort come on and learn how to build the perfect resume. And we're starting to see job offers now coming through for our community. So it's a really exciting time. I really recommend joining. And that's opentowork.community. And if you have any questions, just reach out. Well, Christine, until next time, thank you so much for being a guest, and good luck with Quantum Motion.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.